Ladies and gentlemen, too many of us are spending our lives chasing applause instead of purpose. We're measuring our worth by likes, views, and fleeting validation, thinking if the world just notices us, we'll finally feel fulfilled. But attention is temporary. Growth is lasting. In the world we live in today, it's easy to get addicted to being seen. But ask yourself, do you want to be noticed, or do you want to be remembered for something meaningful? Because there's a difference between being famous and being valuable. Simon Sinek once said, working hard for something we don't care about is called stress. Working hard for something we love is called passion. And chasing attention, that's stress. But chasing growth, that's passion, discipline, and deep fulfillment. So today, let's talk about shifting the focus from the spotlight to the soil, from being watched to becoming better, from chasing noise to building a legacy. In a world that thrives on visibility, it's easy to confuse attention with direction. Everywhere we look, people are trying to be seen, posting, sharing, broadcasting every detail of their lives, hoping for that dopamine hit that comes from being liked, followed, or praised. The problem is that attention has become a modern form of currency, but it's unstable. It comes and goes with trends, timing, and algorithms. It doesn't last, and more importantly, it doesn't guide you toward anything meaningful. That's the danger of chasing attention. It distracts you from the path of true growth. It makes you focus outward when what you really need is to look inward. Attention is a distraction, growth is a direction. When you chase attention, you're reacting, you're molding yourself to fit what others want, what the world rewards in the short term. You compromise your identity, your values, and sometimes your integrity just to get a little more visibility. But growth works in the opposite way. Growth asks you to stand still and go deep. It asks you to commit to the long game to become better, not just more popular. And unlike attention, which is given to you by others, growth is something you give to yourself. It is intentional. It is earned. People often mistake being busy with being productive, and similarly, they mistake being noticed with being valuable. But there are countless examples of people who were never in the spotlight, yet built something extraordinary. They mastered their craft in silence, improved consistently, and showed up day after day even when no one was watching. That's what direction looks like. It's when your focus is on the journey, not the audience. When your identity is rooted in progress, not popularity. The problem with attention is that it's never satisfied. It's addictive. You get one viral moment and you want another. You gain 10,000 followers and now you want 50,000. The bar keeps moving, you keep chasing. And in the chase, you stop evolving. You stop asking yourself what really matters. Growth, on the other hand, is deeply fulfilling because it's not about anyone else's scoreboard. It's about being a better version of yourself than you were yesterday. It's personal, it's grounding, and it leads to real change. We live in a time where you can look successful without actually being successful. Filters, edits, fake smiles, rented lifestyles, they give the illusion of achievement. But true growth can't be faked. You can't Photoshop discipline. You can't fake consistency. You can't shortcut experience. Growth is raw, it's hard, it's often invisible, but it's what sets apart those who make noise from those who make a difference. When you operate from a place of growth, your goals shift. You stop asking, how can I be seen? And start asking, how can I serve? How can I learn? How can I contribute? Your ego takes a back seat and your purpose takes the wheel. That shift changes everything because growth doesn't chase the crowd. It builds quietly, often in solitude. It's not glamorous, but it's powerful. And over time, it attracts the right kind of attention, the kind that's rooted in respect, not hype. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop performing and start progressing. When you wake up every day with the intention to improve, not impress. When you define success not by numbers, but by depth. And when you realize that it's far better to be remembered for the value you brought than for the noise you made. Attention is easy to chase because it's loud and fast. Growth is harder because it's quiet and slow. But one builds ego and the other builds character. One gets you likes, the other gets you legacy. So the next time you find yourself obsessing over whether people are noticing your work, stop and ask yourself, am I growing? Or am I just performing? Because in the end, it's not about being in the spotlight. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't need it to shine. Attention may open doors, but growth is what prepares you to walk through them. Choose direction over distraction. Choose growth. Validation is one of the most tempting forces in the human experience. From a young age, we're conditioned to seek approval from parents, teachers, peers, and later, the wider world. We equate validation with worth. A compliment feels like proof that we're enough. A like, a share, a follower count. It all becomes a scorecard we use to judge ourselves, but the reality is validation fades. It's momentary, it satisfies briefly, and then leaves us hungry for more. Like a sugar rush, it feels good in the moment but offers no real nourishment. On the other hand, growth compounds. It builds on itself. It doesn't give you the same instant high, but it creates a foundation of fulfillment that doesn't need external approval to stand strong. When you chase validation, your sense of value becomes external. It depends on what others think, how they respond, and whether they applaud you. But when you focus on growth, you shift your measure of success inward. You begin asking, am I better than I was yesterday? Rather than, did they like me today? That change in mindset is subtle but powerful. It turns you from a performer into a builder. It transforms you from someone waiting for applause to someone driven by purpose. The problem with validation is that it can never truly define who you are. People are fickle. Their tastes change. What they love today, they may criticize tomorrow. If your identity is based on what others think, you're constantly at their mercy. You'll change who you are to fit in. You'll hide your real self just to be accepted. And the tragedy is, in the process of being validated by others, you lose your own self-respect. Growth, however, is different. Growth is authentic. It's about pushing yourself, learning, evolving, failing, and getting back up. Not because someone is watching, but because you know it matters. Growth is quiet. It happens when no one's cheering you on. It happens in the moments of doubt, in the long nights, in the early mornings, in the grind that nobody sees. It requires patience. It demands consistency. And most importantly, it compounds over time. Just like investing money and watching it grow over the years, when you invest in your mindset, skills, discipline, and values, you may not see immediate results, but eventually you'll build something unshakable. There's a reason why people who are off committed to growth and outlast those chasing fame. Validation seekers burn out. They're constantly adapting to external pressures, never satisfied, always anxious about whether they're still relevant. But those who grow are rooted. They may not be flashy, but they're resilient. They may not be loud, but they're consistent. And over time they rise, not because they demanded attention, because they earned respect. Think about the people you admire most deeply. It's probably not because they were popular or constantly praised. It's because they evolved. They stood for something. They improved. They contributed. Their value wasn't dependent on recognition. It was built on who they became. That's the power of growth. It doesn't rely on the world to tell you who you are. It helps you become the person you're meant to be. Validation creates a dependency. Growth creates independence. One makes you fragile, the other makes you strong. And in a world that changes fast, where opinions are tossed around like confetti, you need something deeper than praise to hold on to. You need a core of self built through experience, effort, and progress. That only comes through growth. There's nothing wrong with appreciation. Everyone likes to be acknowledged. But there's a difference between appreciation and dependency. When your motivation is rooted in validation, your joy will always be conditional. But when it's rooted in growth, your joy is constant because it's based on progress, not perception. So the next time you find yourself needing someone to notice, to approve, to clap, pause and ask yourself, what am I really seeking? Is it the fleeting comfort of praise or the lasting fulfillment of becoming better? Because validation may lift you for a moment, but growth carries you for a lifetime. Chase the path that compounds. Invest in your growth. Build yourself so well that you don't need applause to keep moving. Because validation may light a spark, but growth fuels a fire that never goes out. In the age of social media and constant exposure, it's easy to believe that being popular is the same as being purposeful. But the two are not only different, they're often at odds with one another. Popularity depends on perception, on being liked by many, on aligning yourself with what's trending. Purpose, on the other hand, is about alignment with your deeper values. It's about doing what matters even when it isn't recognized, applauded, or approved by others. When you chase popularity, you lose sight of your own path. When you chase purpose, you become grounded, focused, and fulfilled. That's why it's crucial to stop chasing popularity and start chasing purpose. Popularity asks, what do people want to see from me? Purpose asks, what do I need to become? One is external, the other internal. One is a performance, the other is a mission. The world is filled with people trying to be liked, admired, and accepted, and yet so many of them feel empty. Why? Because attention without intention is hollow. You can have a huge following and still feel like you're going nowhere. That's what happens when you sacrifice the purpose to popularity. You get seen, but you don't grow. You get heard, but you're not fulfilled. When you chase popularity, you shape-shift. You adapt your identity to fit into spaces you were never meant to be. You do things for attention, not because they're right, but because they're trending. Over time, you start losing the essence of who you are. You forget why you started. You stop asking if it aligns with your values. And soon, the mask becomes the face. But when you chase purpose, you move differently. You stand firm in your beliefs. You make decisions that may not make you famous, but they make you proud. Purpose is not glamorous. It doesn't always bring applause. In fact, sometimes it brings criticism, loneliness, and discomfort. But it also brings clarity. It gives you a reason to wake up every day. It becomes a compass that helps you navigate life, even when the noise of the world tries to drown you out. Purpose gives your struggle meaning. It turns failure into fuel. It turns rejection into redirection. People who chase purpose don't need to be the center of attention. They're too busy building, serving, and evolving. They understand that real impact doesn't always come with a spotlight. Some of the most purposeful people in the world are not the most popular. They're the ones who chose to go deep rather than wide. They chose to do the work, not just for recognition, but because it mattered. And over time, that quiet consistency turns into legacy. Popularity is addictive. The more you get, the more you want. It tricks you into thinking you're successful just because people are watching. But attention is not the same as impact. Being well known is not the same as being well respected. A viral post may bring temporary fame, but purpose brings long-term transformation. That's the difference between being noticed and being significant. Chasing purpose also means accepting that your journey might be different from everyone else's. It might be slower. It might not come with instant rewards. But it will be real. And in a world full of filters, edits, and facades, real is rare. When you operate with purpose, you build something no trend can take away. You don't just attract fans, you inspire people. You don't just get attention, you create change. Purpose brings peace. When you're aligned with what truly matters to you, you stop seeking constant validation. You stop comparing your life to others. You stop needing everyone to approve. Why? Because you're grounded in something bigger than the opinions of others. You're driven by a mission, not applause. At the end of the day, popularity fades. Trends pass. Opinions shift, but purpose stays. It grows with you, it strengthens you, and it reminds you why you started when things get hard. That's what makes it so powerful. That's why it's worth chasing. So ask yourself, am I doing this because it's popular or because it's purposeful? Am I chasing likes or legacy? Am I building a brand or becoming a better human? Because when the light go off and the applause fades, what you'll be left with is the impact you made, the people you helped, and the person you became. Chase purpose, not popularity. Because purpose doesn't just make you successful, it makes you whole. In a world that craves instant results and overnight success, it's easy to believe that applause is the ultimate measure of progress. We start to think that if no one sees us, it doesn't count. If there's no recognition, it must not matter. This mindset traps us in a cycle of performing rather than improving. We begin to create not from a place of purpose, but from a hunger for praise. But true growth doesn't work that way. Growth requires consistency, not applause. It's built in silence, strengthened through repetition, and sustained by commitment, not attention. Consistency is the engine behind all meaningful progress. It doesn't rely on mood, motivation, or external validation. It shows up whether or not someone is watching. It repeats the right action until that action becomes a habit, and then a lifestyle. Applause, on the other hand, is conditional. It comes and goes with trends. It depends on the reactions of others. You can't build a life, a career, or a meaningful sense of self-worth based on applause because it's unstable. Consistency, by contrast, creates stability. It's the quiet force behind every powerful transformation. When we rely on applause to fuel our work, we become reactive. We create based on what will get the most likes, not what's most true to us. We adjust ourselves to fit what people want instead of focusing on what we actually need to do to grow. This mindset leads to burnout, frustration, and ultimately disconnection from our deeper goals. But when we shift the focus from applause to consistency, we reclaim our power. We stop chasing moments and start building momentum. Growth is rarely glamorous. It often looks like repetition. It looks like waking up early, showing up when you're tired, doing the same thing over and over with little visible progress. But every small step taken in alignment with your purpose builds a stronger foundation. And while others may not notice, you begin to feel different. You begin to think differently. You start becoming the kind of person who doesn't need applause to stay committed, because the habit itself becomes the reward. Think about the gym. Applause doesn't make you stronger. Consistent training does. It's not one intense workout that transforms your body. It's dozens, hundreds of sessions stacked over time. The same is true in every area of life. You don't become a leader, creator, or thinker by waiting for praise. You become better by showing up, doing the work, and trusting the process even when no one sees your effort. There will be times when your work goes unnoticed, when you feel invisible, when the temptation to quit creeps in because no applause to validate your journey. Those moments are the most important. Because in those moments, you're forced to ask yourself why you're really doing what you do. Are you doing it because you love the craft, because you're committed to growth, because you believe in your mission? Or are you doing it for recognition? When you commit to consistency, you begin to measure success differently. You stop asking, did they notice? And start asking, did I improve? You shift your focus from results to effort, from noise to depth. And this shift is where real growth happens, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows, not on the stage, but in the practice. Over time, consistent effort creates something applause never trust in yourself, confidence that isn't dependent on others, discipline that doesn't break when the audience disappears. You learn that your power isn't in how others respond, it's in how you choose to show up every day, regardless of the outcome. The truth is, applause feels good, but it doesn't last. It doesn't teach you. It doesn't build resilience. It doesn't sharpen your skills. But consistency does. Consistency transforms who you are. It slowly molds your identity into someone who doesn't just chase goals but embodies growth. Someone who doesn't wait for permission to move forward. Someone who understands that greatness is not about grand moments. It's about doing small things with excellence over and over again. So if you're tired of not being seen, of working hard without recognition, remember this: the work you're doing in silence is never wasted. Every disciplined action you take is a vote for the person you're becoming. Keep showing up, keep practicing, keep building, because one day the results will speak louder than any applause ever could, and you'll realize that the journey wasn't about being celebrated, it was about being transformed. We live in a time where highlights dominate. Scroll through any social media feed and you'll see perfect moments, exotic vacations, career wins, flawless selfies, and curated lifestyles. These snapshots create the illusion of constant success, making it easy to believe that everyone else is thriving while we're struggling. But these highlights are not real milestones, they're fragments. They're carefully selected glimpses of life, edited and filtered to appear better than reality. And when we start comparing our growth to someone else's highlight reel, we set ourselves up for frustration, self-doubt, and even failure. Growth isn't glamorous. It's not found in the snapshots, it's found in the behind-the-scenes grind, the messy middle, and the quiet progress no one sees. Social media has redefined how we perceive success. We've come to associate worth with visibility and growth with how much attention it gets. But true growth isn't measured in likes, followers, or viral moments. It's measured in how much you're improving when no one's watching. It's about how you're showing up for yourself on the hard days, how you respond to setbacks, how you stretch beyond your comfort zone. These are the real milestones, internal ones, not external validations. When you measure yourself against someone else's highlights, you ignore your own unique path. You forget that every highlight comes with a backstory full of struggle, doubt, failure, and relentless effort. But these backstories are rarely shared. Instead, we get the polished version. And the danger is we start assuming that if our journey doesn't look that polished, we must be doing something wrong. But nothing could be further from the truth. Growth is messy. It's non-linear. It often feels like you're going backward before you move forward. That's not failure. That's real progress. We've been conditioned to expect instant results. If we don't see improvement quickly, we assume we're failing. But growth is slow and layered. It happens in small steps, not giant leaps. And those small steps don't always look impressive. You won't post a photo of staying up late studying, or practicing in an empty room, or failing and trying again. But those are the moments that define you. Those are the true markers of growth, not a filtered snapshot that got 100 likes. The problem with highlights is that they create pressure to perform rather than progress. You start doing things just to be seen rather than to become better. You start chasing moments instead of mastering your craft. And eventually you burn out because chasing attention is exhausting, but chasing growth is empowering. When you realize that milestones don't always come with applause, you free yourself from the trap of needing to be seen. You start honoring your journey not for how it looks, but for how it shapes you. Think about how a tree grows. It doesn't shout, it doesn't sparkle. It simply roots itself, takes in sunlight and water, and slowly stretches toward the sky. Growth is often invisible until it's undeniable. The same is true for you. You might not see results right away, and the world might not notice either. But something is happening beneath the surface. You're learning, you're building discipline, you're gaining experience. That's real growth, even if it's not Instagram worthy. There's a kind of quiet pride that comes from knowing you're growing even if no one else sees it. You start valuing the process over the praise. You begin to appreciate your own progress, no matter how small, and over time, those small improvements lead to massive change. Not all milestones come with fanfare. Some of them come in the form of resilience, clarity, or a mindset shift, but they matter just as much, if not more, than the flashy moments. Don't let someone else's highlight reel make you doubt your hard work. Don't trade your long-term vision for short-term attention. You don't need an audience to grow. You need commitment. You need patience, and you need to stay focused on your own lane. The world will see the results eventually. But by then, you won't be chasing their approval. You'll already know your worth because you built it in silence. Real growth isn't about being seen. It's about becoming someone you're proud of. The milestones that matter most are the ones that transform you on the inside, not the ones that look good from the outside. Keep going even if no one's watching, because you're not just creating moments. You're building momentum. In a world driven by attention, it's easy to believe that the loudest voice wins. The boldest image, the flashiest success, the trendiest opinion, all of it screams for acknowledgement. We've been led to think that if we're not seen, we're not valuable. If we're not trending, we're not relevant. But the truth is, real confidence isn't loud, it's quiet. It doesn't need to be announced, celebrated, or constantly affirmed. It simply is. A quiet confidence doesn't seek the spotlight because it knows its worth doesn't depend on who's watching. It's a confidence built on self-awareness, growth, experience, and resilience, and it's far more powerful than anything that screams for attention. When you carry quiet confidence, you stop chasing validation. You stop trying to prove something to everyone else and start proving something to yourself. You know you're not defined by external applause, so you no longer feel the need to compete in the popularity game. You don't have to dominate every room or impress every person. Instead, you let your actions speak, your work speak, your growth speak. And that kind of confidence leaves a lasting impression, not because you forced it, but because it's rooted in authenticity. People often mistake arrogance for confidence, but they couldn't be more different. Arrogance shouts because it's secure. It needs attention to feel significant. Quiet confidence, on the other hand, doesn't need to be the center of the room. It listens more than it speaks. It observes before it acts. It knows that self-worth is not something handed to you by the crowd. It's something you build when you consistently show up, push your limits, and stay grounded in your values. A quiet confidence comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. It means you don't have to conform just to be accepted. You don't bend your identity for applause. You're not easily shaken by opinions or setbacks because your confidence isn't based on the unpredictable approval of others. It's based on your own growth and effort. And because of that, you carry yourself with calm strength. When you stop chasing attention, you free yourself to focus on your own lane. You stop wasting energy trying to be seen and start using that energy to build. While others are busy curating an image or cultivating character. While they seek validation from strangers, you seek alignment with your purpose. And in the long run, that inner confidence will carry you further than any spotlight ever could. There's a kind of peace that comes with quiet confidence. You don't constantly second-guess yourself. You don't live in fear of criticism. You accept that not everyone will understand you, and that's okay. You're not here to please everyone. You're here to live a life that's true to you. You trust the process, even when it's slow. You trust your voice, even when it's not the loudest. You trust your progress, even when no one's clapping. That trust, built from experience and effort, becomes unshakable. Quiet confidence also creates stronger relationships. People are drawn to authenticity. They respect those who are real, grounded, and steady. When you no longer need attention, you become more present. You listen better without expecting applause. You support others without feeling threatened. That's what real strength looks like. It lifts others while standing firmly on its own. The journey to quiet confidence isn't easy. It requires you to stop performing and start being. It challenges you to sit with yourself, to know your weaknesses, and to keep growing despite them. It teaches you to value depth over display, progress over perfection. But once you build that confidence from within, no one can take it away from you. So stop trying to be louder. Stop trying to prove your worth with every post, every win, every public move. Let go of the need to be seen all the time. Focus on being steady, being consistent, and being honest with yourself. The world may not notice right away, but in time, your presence will speak louder than words. And when people do notice, it won't be because you demanded attention. It'll be because your quiet confidence became impossible to ignore. Real power doesn't need a stage. Real strength doesn't need to shout. And real confidence doesn't ask for permission. It walks quietly, but leaves an echo that lasts far beyond the noise.